So the fucking...
Whiskey, I have to get somewhere. A filthy alcohol when I come home and be like...
Fucking alky fuck.
Yeah.
So, talk to me about the Terminator series.
The Terminator series.
The Terminator is a series.
Well, so... Yeah, Terminating the Terminator. What... I think has happened. What I think has happened with the Terminator series. Oh,
it's just me, Mike. We've been
just
drinking. We've been drinking.
Yes. Now, the Terminator.
Why is that? That's the most shameless piece of shoehorning.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's our bread and butter, and I can't do it, but I liked it. I liked it. I did like it.
Not many people know the Terminator. Anyway.
Sure, good, excellent,
yeah.
Fantastic.
The Terminator is an interesting. I think it's an emblematic series. Let's start from here. I think it's a series that is emblematic of what is both great and bad about Hollywood that has come and gone over the last sort of 30 years, 35 years. Because it's as old as I am. And it's a sort of. It's been an exercise in building and squandering goodwill, and I think it's emblematic of that. You know, it's a very interesting series to look at now in hindsight because of how it came to be, the hands it's ended up in, you know, how it's been batted about from party to party over the decades that it's been around, and what it's done for those involved and all that kind of thing. It's a really interesting.
That's my fundamental interest in it. I think it creates a very good discussion of art versus business because most of your franchises have a studio attached to them, and that holds true for the most part. So, and I've said this before, and I did attempt to write something on this, years ago for the internet, not this channel. In that it's this nomadic series. So like Dirty Harry is a Warner franchise, and speaking of Warner, they're all about those because they still use as time goes by as their thing, and they're all about Casablanca and obviously their animation branch and stuff like that. But they're this kind of prestige studio, and when we talk about independent film, what we're really talking about is Fox and Warner.
Yeah.
And that's been thrown into a loop because Disney have come into the game the last few years and really fucked that up, and now they've absorbed Fox, it seems.
Yeah, you had Searchlight as well, which was...
So yeah, they did kind of this supposedly independent offshoot of Fox, and the Predator and Alien of Fox properties.
Yeah.
And now again we've got Marvel, which is a subsidiary of Disney. All these things were attached to stuff, and okay, it didn't necessarily mean they were always good, and they didn't necessarily mean there was always like a stewardship to them. Because, for example, the Star Trek series is a Paramount thing. Bond is Eon, right? And
Bond is Eon is the production company. Dan Jack is the financial controller, I think. But Eon crucially have, I think, 50% stake, and MGM had bought another 50%.
And Sony?
Well, Sony bought MGM, so therefore they had a controlling stake in it, and now that's sort of gone around UA, United Artists.
That's a bit more, that's a kind of nebulous one, I guess, but they tend to be, whereas Terminator. I've got this Terminator. True. I've got this thing tied in, I wrote it all down, so like Terminator 1 was done by Hemdale, and I can't remember who at Hemdale used to be a musician, and then Terminator 2 was Coralco, and Terminator 2 represented a completely new model for doing this stuff, in that Terminator 2, as you remember, there was a strange situation when this film was coming out that we were too young to see, yet this insane bombardment of, if you weren't alive at the time, like Terminator 2, the merchandising was insane, because there was action figures and video games and tie-ins and toys and lunchboxes for a movie you couldn't see, because they funded that film on merchandise before they'd even shot a frame.
And it's an odd, when you think about it in hindsight, it's a very odd, or at the time, it's a very odd thing to throw all that behind, because you're kind of like, the first Terminator is an 18-rated horror sci-fi thing. You've got, 7 years between that and the second one. The second one comes around and they're like, this is going to be an action extravaganza that we're kind of market at kids. It's like, why are you...
It's a straight, because it deliberately goes to the length of, it softens the Terminator. And people use that to beat Terminator 2 over the head, which I think is unfair, because actually what you see from the T-1000 is actually very violent and quite unpleasant.
Yeah, and unyielding.
So the Terminator being Arnold Schwarzenegger's interpretation of the T-800 model is thrown into shade by the violence of the T-1000, but it has a kid in it.
Yeah.
And it's softer. Now, I understand that Terminator 3 was done by C2 Pictures, which I think was Mario Casar still, and it was like an offshoot of Coralco. Mm-hmm. And I believe that was actually bankrolled by a hedge fund company.
I thought that was Salvation.
Oh, was it Salvation?
It was Salvation.
Oh, what's that? Okay, sure. Yeah. So Terminator 3 is another company. So the only stewardship is a kind of an executive producer level. So creatively, it shares nothing. And that's one Terminator 3 breaks from Cameron. I think that's what's really interesting about it, in a bad way, is because there's really no connective tissue creatively. And one of the reasons it sat in limbo for so long is because it didn't really have any stewardship or ownership, and there was no, if you're trying to get your Alien film or whatever, I'm sure there's studio politics, but you get through it eventually because everyone wants to make money. Terminator 3 didn't really have that, and they've replaced all of the cast apart from Arnold, and it's got this weird kind of, and Earl Bowen, of course, bless him. But they have this kind of, it doesn't feel like part of the same series. It has this weird TV movie thing. The tone's all off.
It's what. Like, it's when on the rare occasion that I run into someone in the pub who's heard of us on YouTube or whatever, and he goes, do Michael Caine queefing on Sean Connery or something.
That does sound pretty good.
It's the sort of pub lad interpretation of what Terminator 2 was. It's that sort of like, and then a bigger explosion, and then a fucking bad guy, but this time it's got tits and it's a girl, and and it's like. And then he plonks his head back. It's like an idiot watch Terminator 2, and that's what.
Yes, it is. It's like it's the sort of Terminator 3 is Terminator 2 through frosted glass, with a head injury whilst drunk.
But it's just a sort of a really lackluster reinterpretation of that, and it's.
I will
with more
give
tits
that.
And boobs.
I will give that to Terminator Salvation.
Yeah,
it tried to do something different. It did it very badly. But it tried to do something different.
I think it was also slightly a reaction of one of the criticisms of Terminator 3 was this idea that I remember thinking in the lead up to Terminator 3, I was like, it makes so much more sense for this to be, how could you set this in anything but the future war now? Because the whole point was that the whole past element, or present if you like, element of Terminator was resolved. So now, if you're going to make a Terminator film, it's got to be set in the war, because how can we have anything like what? You can't have another one sent back through time again to save John Connor or Sarah Connor. And it's like, that's sort of what they do anyway. And it's like, well, it's just lazy retread. Whereas Salvation is kind of the thing where they went, okay, yeah, all right, we'll do that now.
And Salvation, again, there was some kind of hedge fund company that got involved to fund Salvation. That's now disappeared. The rights then went out to tender, essentially, after that. And Joss Whedon did this kind of thing where I think he offered $1 for them. And I think he tried to gamble his own reputation on that, and that they're going to do that because it's Joss Whedon, I'm going to make them a bunch of money. And it didn't really work because they didn't go for it. So the Ellisons, and I can't remember the names, it's a brother and sister team, the Ellisons, who owned Skydance Pictures, who had been involved in the Star Trek reboot, got involved, and
Kelvin timeline. I do listen.
Look at that! He just done a.
I just done a Star Trek. Make it so, Commander Wall.
Twice.
No, number 2. Number what?
Number 1.
Number 1. Fuck.
I'll take it. You're riding a wave of goodwill. I'll absolutely take it.
Sorry, McCallum. Oh no, the other one.
My name's James Bond. I'm a spy. I remember
Played
when
by Michael Caine.
My dad's James Bond. Harry Palmer. He's the working class Bond.
It's made by Harry Saltzman. So there you go.
Wonderful, excellent. Carry on.
Yes. Terminator Genisys was Genisys. So when Skydance took that on, I think a lot of the capital they piled into that, not literally, figuratively speaking, was the reason Star Trek works is because we did a clever time travel thing, and what we're going to do with this is a clever time travel thing. And I remember initially the rumours were that it was going to revisit scenes from Terminator 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And I've got to admit, they made a lot of good noises there. Because it's like, this is going to be a really tricky line to walk, but if you do something... Because I personally think, and I've got reservations I could get into in a really nerdy way, I think the 2009 Star Trek really works on a lot of levels. And
I liked it. I'm a big fan of it.
And
again, coming at it from a layman's point of view.
sure, and it would take a lot to impress me.
Yes,
on
of course,
that front,
yeah.
and it did, and I like it. And I kind of thought, well, wow, if they're sort of doing something of that vein, and they used that. Get the fucking rights.
Yeah.
And if they're doing something in that vein, then fine. And this was a case of people who were completely unrelated to the Terminator franchise coming in and buying it because of brand recognition, and it was designed to make money, which it did in China and nowhere else. And then the end product, because I gave it as much goodwill as I could, because I thought, I think maybe they might have,
I remember at the time,
yeah. And then it was so laughably bad, like embarrassing. It was embarrassingly bad. And again, much like Terminator 3, because what my one thing that Terminator 3 shows not enough reverence. Terminator Salvation shows way too much, as we discussed,
in the wrong areas as well. I think it's misplaced.
And sort of Terminator Genisys somehow splits the difference between the two, in that it's completely unreverent but far too reverent at the same time, because it's people that are creatively have nothing to do with it. And James Cameron was clearly sat there rubbing his hands in the background waiting for the rights to revert, which I was surprised he did anything with, and he's doing it by proxy. I mean, the two kind of by proxy projects that are coming our way are seemingly this Joker film is Scorsese via the medium of Todd Phillips,
right? And
then we've got Cameron's Terminator sequel via the medium of Tim Miller.
The Joker one I'm quite up for, because I think, why the fuck not? I mean, I just think that's such an interesting...
Same attitude.
Do you know what?
Same attitude,
Terminator, mate. I find it harder to cop that attitude with.
Yeah.
Because I think it's...
a bit too close to it, maybe.
I just think it's... You can't course correct it at this point. Genisys is proof of that. They tried to... The best thing about Genisys was the fact that it was the scene set in the 84 timeline. And I was grateful, props to them for sort of going after the first film and not because the cash grab would have been scenes from 2. And they didn't. Which
I thought they were going to do.
Yeah, I heard that as well, but they didn't do it. I mean, I guess they put a T-1000 in it, but apart from that, it was great. I mean, I just thought the frustrating thing with Genisys is this squandered opportunity. It's like you've got all these things, and now they've got Arnie and Linda Hamilton back. I think the fact that Arnold keeps returning to this well long after it's fucking dead, and it's frustrating me now because it's like, no, the T-800 this time is old, but it can be old because it's covered in living tissue and it is and that ages and it's fine, I know, and it's like, mate, come on, man, like just fucking let it go, like, or do the de-aging thing on him if you got to put him in there. But it's like it's this crowbarring of him into it that I just think is that the horse has bolted on that. You had your chance, you really had your chance. Like if Cameron wanted to come back and do something, he could have done it.
Yeah. And he chose not to, and it was
wisely.
His thing.
Wisely.
Well, that's the thing. Do you know, if it wasn't for a kind of legal situation, and again, I wrote a kind of essay about it that I was going to parlay into a video, and I still might, but it's this kind of, there's a whole interesting legal thing, and it all stems from the fact that he and Gail Ann Hurd needed to get it made, and they did whatever they could to get the first film made.
Yeah.
And then they came back for the second one, and I've got this long-standing theory that I consider James Cameron a P.T. Barnum figure, and I think his first embarkation onto that was Terminator 2, because it was sold as a kind of theme. It's a thrill ride rather than a film,
right? And
that crept into it crept into the film language. And something when we were first doing like reviews and stuff together, I used to sarcastically use the phrase "it's a thrill-packed roller coaster ride."
Right.
And that crept into film marketing, and it's something, it was a thrill-packed roller coaster ride of a film.
Right.
And Terminator 2 was that.
Yeah.
And that, and I wrote about this on my degree, not for Toby, but for one of his colleagues, that, again, Cameron is P.T. Barnum, because that reaches its apex with Avatar. Because Avatar was not sold, to me, I don't think it was sold as a film, it was sold as an experience.
Yeah.
It wasn't sold on the basis of its narrative or its characters.
Yeah.
It was sold upon the basis of
the
its
world of fucking
the world that you will experience,
yeah,
and the kind of supposedly tactile experience you have via the medium of a 3D film. It wasn't
interesting. Yeah, there's a cross pollination there between him and what Nolan does. I think Nolan's has a bit more foresight, he sees down the road a bit further. But I think you're right. I think they're two directors very much obsessed with the idea of cinema, not home video. Even though I know Cameron does talk about, like, I know Terminator 2 was shot with optimized film for video or something, wasn't it? Or, I can't remember.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was shot on I can't remember the type of film.
So optimized for home video. But then that plays into the entire concept of Terminator 2 was, I love it dearly, but it was a marketable product. And that plays into its longevity, because that's them as a marketing people saying to you, this is still going to look good on tape. Yeah.
I mean, it was I think it was the genius of Terminator 2 as with Aliens, but obviously it was much more. I would argue that it's Terminator 2 is, in terms of being a sequel, is kind of more complete because it's written by the same guy. Obviously, I think he did an amazing job with Aliens, but I think Terminator 2 has that thing of.
Well, it's his own concept.
It's his own concept, and it's like it's turning certain elements, the right elements, up to 11. It's still a chase movie. It still hits the same beats, but it's just that sort of conceptual. Mutation.
I might watch it when you fuck off. I've suddenly got the warm fuzzy feels again.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it is like putting on a well-worn suit or a leather jacket you've had for years.
Coat, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It has that about it, and even down to the score and everything. It's like it's that. It is, and I guess that is partly because it's something we grew up with. It's also a film that we were around to experience as a new thing. I say that as
when it came out on video, because this is the thing, I got obsessed with the Terminator, and I watched the first Terminator when I was very young, and I think I was just in time for the hype train of Terminator 2, which I wasn't allowed to see, and my parents didn't allow me to see. When it came out on tape, I went around my friend Tom's house, and the summer after it came out, Tom and I used to say that we watched it 50 times, and I'm not sure that's true. But we watched it over and over and over and over, and we memorised it, and we used to sit around drawing Terminators, and we were obsessed with it. Because it was marketed to us before we were allowed to fucking watch the thing.
It's another example of that. We've talked about this before, but it's like that. There's the difference between an adult and a mature film. Yes. So something like Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy is a mature film, because it deals with mature ideas, right? Whereas, but it's sort of, I guess, adult in that it has some killing in it.
Well, if you want to do. Yeah, because adult film means porn in the lexicon, and that's not what we're saying. But I
includes themes of an adult, like sex, killing.
A very good example, if you wanted to do that, so let's say a mature film. The example you've given is Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, and a film with adult content is Sucker Punch.
Right.
It pretends to be mature, but it's got it's just tits and blood.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, there's an argument for it on the level of being exploitation, but it's this really irritating film because it thinks it's really smart and it's not. And,
but the point is, there's a delineation there, right? So I think,
very much. I think there's a binary to be had. That's what you were trying to say.
Yeah, and I think Terminator, the
Terminator 1. I don't know if that dude who got all fucking pissy about that is still watching. I hope he is. James Cameron's Terminator 1.
Yes.
I'm referencing a beef from the comments from over 2 years ago, but never mind. Maybe about a year ago.
I think that walks the line between. It has mature themes in it, and certainly Terminator 2 has mature themes in it, because obviously there's the subtext of what it means to be a parent, role.
But reversal. It never feels. Neither of them ever. Well, the first one skirts the first Terminator skirts the line of being trashy.
Yeah.
It skirts the line of being trashy, and it's a horror B movie. Yeah. And they shot without permission on the streets of LA.
It's just high concept. I think that's what gets you, is the high concept of that what would it mean to be chased by an inhuman human? Is the uncanny valley scary?
The world of kind of time traveling cyborgs is filled with kind of slightly trashy, perhaps insincere kind of B-grade stuff, and I think the difference is that it treats it sincerely and it treats it emphatically
and earnestly,
because it is played dead straight. Like Terminator 2 injects a lot of humour, which is part of. I believe that James Cameron has developed the formula for engineering mass appeal. So. He released Titanic, the biggest film of all time, did fuck all for 12 years, and then released the biggest film of all time. Because he's precision engineered what has the broadest appeal. It doesn't offend or whatever. And Terminator 2 is where that starts to creep in, because it's more humorous, whereas Terminator 1 has barely any humour in it. There's barely any levity in Terminator 1 at all.
Oh, yeah. Do you think he has a deconstructionist streak in him? Because he sort of did it. I don't want to say he did it with Aliens, although I think there are deconstructionist elements in that, because he does break the alien down into something else. He sort of does that, clearly does that with Terminator 2, where he completely breaks down the Terminator.
Breaks down the character, and he humanises the character.
True Lies, again, you've kind of got...
If I was to look at the career of James Cameron, the only thing I would say is truly deconstructionist is True Lies.
Okay.
Because I believe it's a deconstruction of the Schwarzenegger persona.
Yeah.
Something which I know that existed in other stuff, but he is so instrumental in creating the Schwarzenegger persona. Yeah. And I think he then took it upon himself 15 odd years later or 10 years later to deconstruct that. Yeah. Because we talked about that, we reviewed it. Like the concept of Schwarzenegger as a Bondian spy makes no sense. It's completely absurd, and that's why it's brilliant. Because he peels off the thing after the tuxedo, knocks out the dogs. It's ridiculous. He's Mr. Universe. He is inconspicuous nowhere.
Well, it's the sort of American version of James Bond, which is in and of itself absurd, and it's the fact that it's played by
an Austrian,
the most famous immigrant to America. Yeah, but that's what American kind of is. Well, and it's sort of like
America is, and it gets talked about it less, and I don't want to go on that tangent, but Australia is another example of a place that it's based entirely around the immigrant experience. Yeah, and it's an immigrant is the ultimate American, because apart from like First Nation and Native, all Americans are immigrants. Like they came from Europe, like apart from the ones that were already fucking there, which First Nation, whatever. But if you want to create the American, Superman is the immigrant experience. It's created by two Jewish kids, and it's Moses from space. Yeah, and Schwarzenegger is this supposed American dream, this supposed American experience is Schwarzenegger's it. You're this fucking weird dude with an unpronounceable name that makes $1 million fucking from real estate, and then decides you can become a movie star. That works out, so fuck it, let's do politics.
He's the embodiment of clarity of vision, a hard work ethic, and the framework around him to have the possibility to do that.
And also definitely being at least a bit of a monster. It would seem. I love him as much as you do. But he's done some questionable stuff. I think that I think modern Schwarzenegger in particular, there is self-awareness of what he's done. God, because I'm sure he's very regretful about knocking up his maid and shit. But
everything he does is turned up to 11. He himself is turned up to 11. His whole fucking body.
He is this insanely cartoonish, ridiculous human. Yeah, he really is. Like everything about him, like you say, is up to 11, and the whole experience.
His genetics are fucking amazing. To get that in Chapman, don't get me wrong, he did steroids, but he admitted that. It's fine. It's interesting. So coming back to the Terminator series, watching the rise and fall of that, it has concurrently kind of, if you had a graph, it would be, obviously you've got sort of this and then this drop off, right? His career kind of, it probably is out of step with it, but it has done the same thing. And it's like, what I find frustrating about current day Schwarzenegger, I still love him, Arnold, if you're watching, I love you. But if you're not. Yeah, but
that's adorable. No, come on,
you never know. You do, but I think what's been frustrating for me is watching him sort of come back to the acting game after politics, and seeing how, bearing in mind now we're in the age of YouTube and the internet, and the fact that he's out there doing his thing. Now I follow him on Instagram. I follow him on all these things. I love seeing his posts.
I do as well.
But there's the occasional thing that comes out where it's a bit sad. Like there was that bit, when he dressed up, they did him up in Terminator makeup, and he walked around
down Hollywood Boulevard.
Yeah, and he came across that guy who was doing Terminator stuff, and he's like, "No, I'm the Terminator. No, I'm the Terminator." He was like, "No, I'm the Terminator." And he goes like, "I'm cybernetic organ," and he reeled off like a line from the covered in liquid endoskeleton or whatever, and it was just like, ooh,
this is the thing now. And there's a kind of distinct break. So Terminator 3 was one of the last things he did before the kind of governorship.
It's a bit Alan Partridge, though, isn't it? If you didn't have the money and the success, it would be a bit like, I'm bouncing back. And
it is. It's massively that, because he said he would never come back to do another Terminator without James Cameron. James Cameron famously told him to take the money and do it. Which he did. But he did it as his last film before the governorship, and it sucks. And frankly, there's this massive upward trajectory, and he went down that far before his governor. So it's end of days, fucking collateral damage, 6 day, all that.
Many days.
Sort of like there.
Yeah.
So he didn't have the chance to go, meh! So he didn't act for ages. And then he had to come back down here. I went to see The Last Stand in the cinema because with my buddy Nick, like, because we love Schwarzenegger, and it's like, and I really liked The Last Stand. I thought it was loads of fun. I thought it was a good time.
Yeah, it really is. It is one of those B movies from the 80s, sort of, but made.
Well, that's
with
the thing, and it knows that, and it had stuff about the immigrant experience. But to digress, the thing was, it's this kind of slightly when he come back after governorship, he wasn't a thing anymore, and he was the biggest star in the world, and then he was all the way fucking down to the bottom of the C list suddenly because he'd taken time out from acting. He wasn't acting, and he'd had some failures. So one thing he always seemed to—he's one of these people. He would never just trot out his catchphrases in a cheap way, like he did them in the movies, but he didn't need to sort of trot them out.
It was De Niro saying, "You talking to me?"
Yeah,
he wouldn't say, "I'll be back" too much.
And when he came back, suddenly it's YouTube videos of him saying, "Get to the chopper."
Well, he comes out on stage and goes, "Get to the chopper," and everyone's like,
"Yeah, I know what that means." Like, he never used to do that.
Yeah, I know.
And one of the hallmarks of comeback Schwarzenegger was all that, and like a bunch of the stuff. I really like.
But do you think all that stuff came about after he'd gone? I think all that was part of the internet thing, that the whole get to the chopper shit was all...
I remember one of my... Okay, so...
That's all dickheads like you and I sitting around going like, remember, get to the chopper, and then...
When I was a kid, I had... So my mum and dad wouldn't let me watch shit, right? But the thing is, I was a reasonably smart kid, so I'd always find a way how to fucking watch it, right? Yeah. I had a mate who's got this mate had a really unusual name. So if I say it, I'm just identifying, which I'm not going to do. So I'm going to call him Jeff for the purpose of this video. This kid Jeff, which is offensive, but Hunstable. Jeff, his mum sort of really give a shit and let him do what he wanted and stuff. And Dad wasn't in the picture, and like she was just kicking back, smoking weed all the time, and so I could go in his and watch what I wanted. Yeah. And I remember even in primary school, he was like, "Have you seen Predator?" And I was like, "No, I'm not allowed to watch Predator." And he's like, "Fucking, you haven't seen Predator?" Like Arnold, he's the first person I remember referring to him as Arnold, like he was a mate. Right. He's like, "Oh no, Arnold's like running away from the monster, and he saves his girlfriend. It's not his girlfriend. He saves his girlfriend. And he says to her, 'Run, get to the chopper.'" Yeah. And he used to quote that shit to me in primary school.
Wow, yeah.
And it's through him I watched that, and then I watched Total Recall. With another friend who had lackluster parenting, and all those kind of things were stuff. I remember even then we were quoting them to each other, and I remember particularly Jeff, talking about Get to the Chopper and putting these things out of these films, and I remember like Jeff's mum, this is so pathetic, had a framed Terminator 2 poster and stuff.
Yeah,
it's just the artifice of Jeff is pathetic. Yeah, they showed a Terminator 2 poster up in their flat and stuff. Right.